Education reform is the name given to the goal of changing public education. Historically, reforms have taken place in one form or another from, I don't know, from the time of Plato forward, and education has been important from the time of Plato forward. In the 1800s, there was a reform. Joseph Lancaster at the head of this reform in England, and he talked about the principles of education and how he was going to reform education and school organization and curriculum. Plato said that education, that students had to want to learn in order to be able to learn, and that was kind of the beginning of education as far as we know it. And then John Dewey believed that you could mold society by changing education. England went through a reform in the 19th century where they privatized education and students paid for education, and that led to Europe and the United States implementing a public education system where the children would be educated in the public sector. In the 1990s to the early 2000s, most states and districts in the 1990s adopted outcome-based education, and then we moved to a standards-based education in most states here in the United States. Outcome-based education reforms usually had other disputed methods such as constructivist mathematics and whole languages added on to them. Some of the contemporary issues that we have faced in public education, and some that have gone through scrutiny in the early 2000s up until the present time, is that some schools have wanted to implement longer school days, after school tutoring. We've had charter schools become very popular, school choice, school vouchers, smaller class sizes, and internet being widely used in the United States for education and other countries as well. Now, we have seen funding levels in different countries such as Finland, Singapore, and Korea. These schools, even though they spend less money per student than we do in the United States, in 2005, I believe we spent approximately 11 to $12,000 per student in the United States. These other countries spend far less, and have found that because of the way that we distribute our funding in the United States, we find a lot of gaps in our education. Some studies have shown that smaller class sizes and newer buildings have improved education. Actually, most have shown that if the funds aren't used in productive ways, that actually it's a waste in our education system. A newer form of education, which is dear to my heart, is technology virtual education, and that is kind of an up-and-coming way to implement learning in the classroom. Blended learning has become very popular. This has also improved numbers and literacy in the United States. I am doing some research, some personal research, and have found that John Taylor Gatto, who is a big proponent of private schools, has found there are 14 good habits and principles of private schools that lead to success. And these 14 principles comprise, and I won't give you all of them, but that the first one is the theory of human nature, that each student will understand that. And most of what he talks about is the good habits of writing, and that we as a people need to be more involved in literacy. And he talked about how in Harvard in between the 1960s and the late 1900s that they required 1,000 words a day of writing from their students, and this created successful learners. I think that no matter what in our education systems, that we can throw more money at it, but it is just like everything else in this world. Unless you take care to actually focus on the independent student and the independent learner, you're not going to provide the kind of learning that they need. We've got to focus on each student and their needs.